welcome to the Ashfield Public School Refugee Week Assembly. We are a multicultural community and acknowledge the Wongal people, who are the traditional custodians on this place we call Ashfield. Together, we are responsible for taking care of this land.
Today we gathered to acknowledge Refugee Week 2021 and its significance for all of us. So, who are refugees and why do they need to leave their homes in search of safety? Refugees are people fleeing conflict and persecution by extremists, as defined by the United Nations Human Rights Council. 80 million, 35 million, and 25 million. But what do these numbers relate to? They relate to people. According to the most recent figures in the United Nations, the number of forcibly displaced people is 80 million worldwide, with 35 million of those being children. 25.7 million is the current population of Australia. This means that the number of displaced and refugee people worldwide is greater than 3 times the population of Australia.
Ashfield Public School has 10 wellbeing choices that we practice and uphold. 2 of the choices which are relevant in Refugee Week are being inclusive and embracing diversity. Our school always welcomes students and families from different cultures, countries, and walks of life, including refugees. Our school motto is every child, every opportunity. This does not just apply to the students at our school. It should apply to refugees. All refugees deserve the same opportunities as every other citizen in our country. Refugees should have the same right to improve their own lives and to contribute to Australia as a whole.
This year, the theme for Refugee Week is Unity, where we celebrate the contributions, the ingenuity, and the tenacity of refugee people. We also acknowledge and promote understanding about why people have been forced to leave their homes and the barriers they face when they do. There is still some fear, misunderstanding, and hostility towards people who are seeking safety and refuge. We see this in some of the language used in the media, also by politicians and policymakers. Unfortunately, we still need to combat this hostility and remember our solidarity of a common humanity and nurture a culture of welcome.
Our school has been promoting unity, harmony and togetherness during Refugee Week for 4 years. We celebrate each year with a whole school collaborative artwork being created. It started with our first work in 2018, Boundless Plains, inspired by the book Refugees by David Miller and taking its title from the lyrics of our national anthem, with boundless plains to share. The ceramic figurines represent the people who have undertaken these journeys in search of safety and refuge, while simultaneously depicting the faces of welcome.
In 2019, we had Home, inspired by the picture book Me and My Fear by Francesca Sana. Even when a refugee person is settled in a new place, there are several boundaries which need to be overcome, including those related to language, employment, and finance. These boundaries are often compounded with underlying trauma and uncertainty. Home was a collection of tiny timber houses and safe places coming together to create a whole city to represent our collective need to help combat the feelings of loneliness and isolation that refugee people often have to process.
Last year, in 2020, we came together through a combination of online learning, a transition back to the classroom, and made Welcome Wish, inspired by the Japanese folklore and the story of Sadako and 1,000 Paper Cranes by Eleanor Coer. This piece was a vision of hope, peace, and a wish for a better situation in the world for refugee people, with 1,000 paper cranes being folded by the students at our school. Images of this piece also feature in the Department of Education's Cultural Diversity Calendar for 2021. This year, we have created Blooms. This installation tells the story of the resilience and creativity of children who are still able to bloom and blossom in the difficult and sometimes traumatic circumstances. It was inspired by the book Lubna and Pebble by Wendy Madour. It tells the story of a little girl, Lubna, who arrives in a world of tents with only her father, and who finds comfort and strength in a pebble she finds on the beach the night she arrives. The author's motivation behind creating her book, Lubna and Pebble, was influenced by the tragic story of Aylan Kurdi, a 3-year-old Syrian boy who drowned with his brother and mother whilst attempting to immigrate to Europe. Aylan's story is also acknowledged within this piece of blooms, with the inclusion of a tiny red t-shirt similar to the one Aylan was wearing as he washed up on the shore, and whose image became the face for the refugee crisis.
All students from kindergarten to year 6 painted their own personalised worry stone, embellished with images and patterns of comfort and love. This work is a celebration of children and their innate characteristics of openness, understanding, caring and forgiveness. It rejoices in the importance of friendship, the significance of sacrifice, and a child's resilience, creativity, and the ability for healing. We would now like to welcome Miss Karen Manning, our artist in residence, and her assistant Miss Jane Bennett Gosling to the stage to explain the current installation.
It's another year. And in that year, we have seen a lot of change. So you remember last year, if you were here, we were in a really weird time. So we're in that point where we were doing like online learning and then also transitioning back to our classroom. I remember going through the statistics for refugee people and forcibly displaced people worldwide. And at that time, it was 70.8 million last year. This number has now blown out. It has increased now to 80 million people. So just in 1 year, we now have 10 million more people who are in a really desperate situation and who are really unable to do anything about it. We're still living in a pandemic world. Things may have changed and improved slightly in Australia, but around the world, the situation is not as promising. So there is still a really big problem around the world. And that's why this piece here was so important to create. And I really thank you so much for being a part of it. And when you come into your classes and you focus and you work so hard, and all these little pieces are so considerate as well. I love being able to come here and look at all those individual pieces that you've created and see them all come together. I think that art is a really powerful way that children and adults can relate to issues in the world and to also heal and to also think about big, important issues. Art can be beautiful, but it can also be quite painful as well to look at. I did find it really sad having to hang up that little red t-shirt there, because in stage 3, and it wasn't a situation that I explained to the students who are in kindy all the way through to stage 2, because it is such a big issue. But now that you are at stage 3, you're about to embark on sort of the next part of your lives, becoming young adults and adolescents. It's nice to be able to have that dialogue with you where we can start opening up these big conversations. And I really appreciate all the input that you've been able to give me in those classes, and all the really thoughtful responses and answers, and just everything that you give me, all your feedback. So I really thank you, because this is really, yes, I may have dreamt up the idea, but if you didn't wholeheartedly participate and get involved and, get really sort of interested in the topics, then this artwork wouldn't exist at all. So this artwork is really about you.